All right. So once more, I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. I will pass this first part to Professor Krikish to take over proceedings. Basically, the special issue is being guest edited by myself and her, and she would take charge of this first part, and then we will come back to other things. But overview of the workshop is just generally to give interested academics in Africa a chance to sort of hear from very experienced accounting history researchers how to put together a piece of work or a piece of research that will be first accepted in the special issue. That's number one priority. But we think, and that's the goal, that there will be appetite for this kind of research going forward. A lot of people on call today are not presenting anything, but they're just here to learn about the process and really what it means to do accounting history research. So in saying that, it's going to be, if you want to consider it as partly a kind of lecture on accounting research or accounting history research, feel free to consider it that way. So because the audience here, the majority of the people in the room are not submitting to the special issue, at least at this point, but maybe they will consider that later. We very much welcome that. But I think there is genuine appetite to really learn and understand how this kind of research is done. Before I pass it officially to Priti, can I also acknowledge our president, Dr. Miriam Roos from Stellenbosch University. Miriam, you want to say something?
Yes, good day, everybody. And I just think this is a very, very exciting workshop. And also, I think very beneficial for a lot of our participants in Africa. And like Yinka was saying, we hope this is not the last, but just something new that will be started and that will expand. I would also like to thank all the people that put a lot of effort in putting this together, Yinka, you and the team, as well as the guest speakers, and I'm looking forward to it. And I wish everybody a very, very productive workshop. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Right, and once more, also, as you can see from the screen there, I think 3 very strong institutions or organizations are partly supporting this. We've got Victoria University of Wellington, we want to give credit to. We're using a lot of the infrastructure provided by the Zoom facility and the meeting setup. So we, Carolyn, the 2 Carolyns are all part of Victoria University, and we are also happy that the university affords to provide us with all of these tools to do things like this. So acknowledgement also goes to that, to the institution. Ricky, it's all yours now.
Thank you, Yinka. Am I clear? Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I'm very grateful for Yinka for his energy in putting the workshop together. Most of the submissions went to him. We shared the discussion on those, and we will be very interested in how the community of participants in this workshop enrich our understanding of what the papers want to put forward and how we can include them in our special issue. The main purpose of the special issue is to encourage accountants in Africa to make use of the very useful tool of accounting history in understanding the development of the profession and practice. Now, in our workshop, we have presentations that span a very wide scope of chronological periods, which is something we expected. We know that few universities in Africa teaching accounting and training professional accountants engage systematically in accounting history as a tool of understanding the practice and the implications of what they are doing. So we hope that this special issue would provide a platform for our colleagues to consider this as something, this discipline, this perspective of accounting history, as something very powerful in understanding where the profession, the discipline, the practice, and society stand with respect to accounting. It is very interesting that in 2021, the British Accounting Review published an entire volume that dealt with accounting history. And that to me showed that the advanced, well-organized profession in its diversity in the United Kingdom realized the importance of understanding historical processes as impacting on practice. So their issue focused on the fact that accounting is indeed a high element, has a very strong element of technicality. We always talk about accounting technology, but the technology is embedded in a development trajectory. And that is what is useful for us to understand, to make sense of how the discipline and the practice currently, in the past, currently, and in future will interact with society in which it operates. So our special issue focuses on the historical accounting for enterprise and society in Africa. So the focus is not on the accountant as such, but the accountant as an instrument, the accountant as an agent of management, of governance, of social interaction, of translating social needs to enterprise, to business, to government, to different role players or stakeholders in society. So what accounting history does, and the BAR emphasized that very clearly, is that it focuses the accountant on the wider impact of the social practice of accounting in the discipline. Now, I know that some of the institutes of chartered accountants or some of the bodies that have the responsibility of training professional accountants across Africa argue that they don't have time in their syllabi to give attention to matters of history, because why is that important? So I think what is an important goal of our special issue is to illustrate how important it is to understand the history and what implications that will have for the actual practice. Apart from that, it's important that we understand that when we train accountants, young people who are very ambitious, who are absolutely talented, who are driven, people who are motivated, when we train them, their understanding of their role is equally important as their understanding of the accounting technology. So the focus of our special issue is to address some of these issues in different environments, in different time periods, in different locations, and through that, over time, bring in the systematic study of accounting history into our curricula as a powerful tool of strengthening the content of the curricula. We are always talking about the legacy of the development of the profession, of the technology, and its embeddedness in a society that perhaps has different histories, different indigenous knowledge systems. And this is because of that it's important that the technology should talk to and translate into the experiences of the individuals involved in teaching and receiving the information. So we are very grateful for the fact that in our workshop, we have the submissions that came to us provide us with an opportunity to look into different localities. There is something on South Africa. There's something on West Africa, equatorial, the French Equatorial Africa. There is some work on more recent developments in South Africa. And then there is some focus on the more general role of leadership within the profession. I hope that the participants will use the opportunity to ask questions and convey their understanding of the perspective of history in the accounting as practice, and that we can strengthen the use of accounting history in the curricula in the long run. So this special issue, we must also thank the editorial board of accounting history for allowing us to put this together. This special issue is really like big missionary work. We really want to use this as a take-off point for the development of more systematic studies in accounting history on the African continent. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say by means of introduction.
Thank you so much.
I think a far more important contribution comes from Carolyn just after me. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kriki. So just in terms of overview, this is just a summary of what we will be going through today, all the presentation. I've sent the program and we will just kind of tick off as we go. I think we just go straight to the keynote presentation, and the keynote presentation is on doing accounting or doing accounting history research, choices to be made. And I think Carolyn and I discussing this, she carefully chose this topic, which she will talk about more, why it is very important that, you know, people who come to watch this or in the room will understand really the context of accounting history and what we can draw out of it. So in a moment, I will pass it on to Carolyn, but just as a quick introduction, Associate Professor Carolyn Fowler is one of the senior faculty in accounting in the School of Accounting and Commercial Law here at Victoria University of Wellington, New Zealand. And her research and teaching include areas of management accounting, accounting technology, and accounting history. Carolyn has also been involved in research in the area of public sector accounting and accounting education, where she has supervised quite a number of good PhD work in that respect. She is one of the 3 joint editors of accounting history, as if you will see in the program later when we come to the panel. She will be one of the panelists that will be talking to us later. And Carolyn is also a fellow of the chartered accounting bodies here, the 2 we've got in New Zealand and Australia, and as well as she's a fellow of chartered management accountants as well for Australasia. She was our former head of school here in the School of Accounting and Commercial Law and has since been playing active leadership role in our management accounting group and other areas. So it's just a very short summary that I can say, but Carolyn, feel free to tell us other things you're doing that I haven't picked up. But it's an honor, and I really want to thank Carolyn. I remember talking to you about this special issue, and you were very supportive in trying to get us through the line to make sure Accounting History Journal considered it as a good thing to do. The floor is yours, Carolyn. I'll stop sharing so you can share your screen. Just a moment. Yeah, here we go.
Now, what's going to happen here? Right, so everybody is happy about that? Right. Where am I going? Up here. I think I'd be used to this after several years of teaching online. Anyway, I'm just going to stop my video so I don't spend my life looking at myself. So anyway, bonjour Marina, and good morning to most everybody, and good evening to others. Yinka and I talked about this, and we decided that really it would be really good just to have a think about what actually constitutes an accounting history research, because it, as Craigie said, it's more than just looking at, well, you know, where did double entry bookkeeping come from? It has such an impact and it covers so much. And the best thing I love about it is that I can actually use it when I'm teaching, because I can say, well, do you realize where this came from? Or, you know, do you understand when I'm teaching infantry, do you actually understand that infantry goes back to the temples in Babylon where they used to, you know, record the tributes that were actually made and keep a tally in an infantry of them. So it actually puts what we're doing in its context over thousands of years. So I thought, well, I'd just talk a wee bit more about what is accounting history. And then I'd talk about some of these things which have already actually been mentioned. So, you know, what is my topic? What is my time period? What is my location? Am I using a theory? And why or why not should I be? You know, what types of methods can I use? And what are the key limitations I have to really be aware of? And then I will put in place some concluding comments. So I thought I'd just start off and say, well, what is accounting history? And we've already talked about it. It's about thinking about the residues of the past to help us speak to the present and the future. And it's a quest to understand accounting. And that a belief that it's actually more than just the techniques that we use for measurement, calculation, and control of economic phenomena. And so when we talk about accounting history, we talk about an understanding of the interaction of accounting and its social and political environments. We talk about it being not only a technical practice, so the techniques for measurement, calculation, and control, but also a social practice. And we talk about how we use it to identify the impacts of accounting and accounting change on organizational and society. So, and I think this is evidenced in the program, you can use a variety of theoretical perspectives drawn from areas like sociology, economics, and political theory. You can look at a wide range of topics and periods and use a variety of methodological approaches. And we can draw things from different disciplines that provide a rich insight into accounting and its past. So it's very much an interdisciplinary and open approach, where it kind of sits and has links into other business and economics history. So we have links into business history, management and organizational history, into financial history, and into economic history. And ourselves, we actually have two things, and I'm going to talk about them a bit later on, where we talk about new accounting history and we talk about traditional accounting history. And quite key here is, sorry, oh, how the hell's that? Sorry, I'm not very well tonight, so get to see it all in fast time. We talk about it, you know, that our historical investigations are used to develop an understanding of the past, and what I've seen coming up, it's certainly doing that, and to provide an insight into both the present and the future. So, as I said, there are several areas and topics that I really want to talk about. And sorry, I'm a bit disjointed. Things like the choices we have to make. So each of you, when you have put together your abstract or your paper, you've actually made these choices. You've talked about, well, what is the topic? Where is it based? What is the location? What am I using a theory? What is the method? What is my limitations? And any paper that you write, you need to make sure that you cover these. Okay, so you will introduce your topic, your background. Why is it important? What do I want to know about it? What is my contribution? What is my research purpose or aim? What are my research questions in this area? You know, and then you'll talk about, well, what time period am I looking at? Where am I looking at? What is my theory or theoretical positioning? You know, what method or methods am I using, and what is the key limitations? So, first sort of thing here is, what is my topic? And that really, I've written here, depends. And it depends on what you're trying to achieve or what is motivating you. And they generally fall into one of these classifications, sometimes more than one. And so we've got here surviving business records. And an example here, excuse me, is paper here on stitching it up, accounting and financial control at J&P Coates Limited from 1890 to 1960. Now, J&P Coates Limited, I remember making things like embroidery cottons, and I'm pretty sure they made lots of other things. And this is a business based on the surviving business records, where they actually look at consolidated accounting, the control and funding of the subsidiaries, private ledgers, and management accounting practices. So we're looking at the business records and looking at unexamined accounting and financial arrangements that, in this case, were part of J&P Coates. We also have business history. Now, business history, the J&P Coates Limited could also potentially fall in there. And, you know, another example is revisiting the interface between race and accounting Filipino workers at the Hamakuna Mill and Company between 1921 and 1939. And this looked at the interface of race and accounting in Hawaiian sugar plantations, and looked at this mill company to shed further light on what the authors talked about as being the dark side of accounting in the control of Filipino workers. And it was very much based around the ideas of labor control and heavily archived evidence. Biography. A good example here is Grant Sampkin's work on Taylor Sailor Spy, which is the case of John Pringle and the transfer of accounting technology, the Cape of Good Hope. And this used a microhistory approach to evaluation the contribution made by John Pringle to transfer British style accounting technology to South Africa or to the Cape Colony, and basically decided that his contribution was actually minimal. Crispography, that's just basically a group of biographies, and probably a good example here is the fraud and incompetence accounting in the Papal States, 1831 to 1859. And that one looked at the Roman Catholic Church and its accountants, which were mostly priests and laymen, and looked at incompetence and fraud, which contributed to the losing most of its territorial in the Second World War of Italian independence from 1859 till its demise in 1870. We also have accounting institutional history, which includes professionalization in the professions. And you can see that's quite heavily done in the journal with, 18.2% to 21.2% early on. And the one here is a study of the emergence of the Kuwaiti Association of Accountants and Auditors, which was, if I remember, Kuwait was a British protectorate, and it looks at the role of the state in facilitating the creation of indigenous accountants, and the Kuwaiti Association of Accountants and Auditors. That also has public sector overtones in it, and we can have other public sector ones. So one here that I picked up was the annual reporting practices of the Australian Commonwealth Government Departments, an instance of deinstitutionalisation, which looked at a critical explanation as to why the annual reports of this department changed between 1942 and 1998. We have comparative international accounting, which is still an area we need a lot more work. And a good example of that is the development of incorporated structures for charities, which was looked at 100 years, and I use that term, comparison of England and New Zealand. And what it did was it looked at why New Zealand, the charities could form as incorporated societies in 1908, but the comparable legislation, charities incorporated organisations, was not enacted in England and Wales until effective from 2013. So why was there 100 years difference? Historiography, a good example here, contribution of the Italian literature to the international accounting history literature, which looks at how to qualify the contribution of Italian scholars to the AH literature. We also have corporate regulation, paper here on the emergence of statutory auditing in France and the recurring issues of independence and competence from 1867 to 1966, which looked at, based on the archives of 2 industrial companies, and how independence and competence of statutory auditors is shown to improve the standards of auditing. Corporate regulation, social institutions, which, as you can see, is something we didn't actually have early on in the journal, but as we've become much more socially orientated, and they include basically, a wide range of things. One here I've got in front of me is 100 years of the annual reporting by the Australian Red Cross about building public trust through emotive disclosures. And that uses the political economy of accounting theoretical framework to take a longitudinal study looking at their practices over the course of a century. So they're just sort of some of the examples, and generally what you'll do is actually fall within one of those. Can somebody tell me when I've got about 5 minutes to go? The next thing you need to think about is, well, what period of time? And as you can see on table 10, we tend to focus in on the 19th and 20th century, but we can go up, and we do have some stuff on the 21st century. Pre-16th century would be nice. We do have some quite interesting, 3 papers that looked at 4 or more centuries. When we're looking at deciding whether something's actually worth, what is history, and we even have this debate as editors, and tend to use around about a 20-year rule of thumb. So pre-2005 should be your latest starting point. But there are exceptions, and that is a lot of things don't actually have a history that goes back 20 years. So you will find papers that might only just be covering the 21st century. And remember, as time goes on, that date creeps up. And so what might have not been history when I started in academia 20 years ago is certainly now history. The other thing here is I wanted to talk about, and I'll probably come back to it when I'm discussing, is this use of periodization in an article. And that's actually splitting your story into time periods as defined by significant historical events, dates, or turning points that determine that change. So it allows you to, instead of talking about a complete 100 years or that, is to actually split or divide your chronological timeline. And so an example was a paper that I wrote actually with Carolyn on From Community to Public Ownership, a tale of changing accountabilities. And that had 2 periods. The first period was when the education system in colonial New Zealand was controlled by not-for-profits. And then we compared it to what happened in the second period, where it moved to public sector control. So there was 2 very distinct times or events that separated us and allowed us to actually make sense of what we were actually looking at. Location, where and when. So geographical tends to be where we kind of start here. And as you can see, I did some analysis back in 2016. And what you can see here is that Africa requires a lot more work. And that was kind of, knowing this was kind of one of the reasons that I talked to Yinka, and I had a discussion, and Carolyn and the other editors, along with Professor Verhoef, that we need to learn more about the history of accounting in Africa, but we also need to learn more about the history of accounting in Africa from the Africans. So that's one area we've actually starting to put a wee bit more emphasis on. Yeah, when we talk place, we might be talking about commercial or public institutions. And we can be talking about your family home, your charities, your religious institutions, your business organizations, and those types of things. Now, the big question I always get asked as an editor is this one. Do I have to use a theory? Well, history is maybe a wee bit different in that there are 2 types of accounting history. One is a traditional accounting history. The second one is what we refer to as new accounting history. Now, traditional accounting history is the history that we've been doing for a long time. And that's really about telling the stories, and it gives us a way of organizing the events and giving them coherence and giving them structure and meaning. what having and implicitly having some sort of interpretation in the explanation. So the key thing here is you don't have a named theory, but you've got to employ explanation in some form. So, and that's normally what I might term theoretical stance or theoretical positioning. So you're positioning your explanation within the literature, and then you need to return to it at the end of the paper. The other one is interpretive or critical history. And that's what we've termed new accounting history. Now, I've been doing accounting history for a long time, since the 1990s. And I remember when this first came out, and we used to be at accounting history conferences and stuff, and these two groups didn't actually like each other. But what we've actually come to nowadays is realizing that it doesn't have one or the other is not right or wrong. It's actually what you need to use, what will help you answer your research question or achieve your research aim. So interpretive or critical history seeks to explicitly explain, and you tend to use an array of theoretical perspectives. And so people will say, well, this is using XYZ theory. Some of the theories that you can actually use are things like economic theories, like agency theory and contracting cost theory or transaction cost economics. My favorite, because that's what I used, was some of the institutional theories, like new institutional sociology, old institutional economics, institutional logics, legitimacy theory, stakeholder theory. So there's a lot of theories that fit around organizations. You might want to use actor network theory. I've seen one or two papers using that. We have a large body of accounting history work using Mikhail Foucault, looking at governmentality and discourse, etc. Occasionally see some work with Bourdieu in it, looking at social capital and other capitals. Starting to see a few things come through on dialogics, occasional feminist theory, a lot of critical theory stuff, Marx, Habermas, etc. Public choice theory, and other political theories are quite common as well. So what should you do? Well, as I've just sort of said, use an appropriate theoretical framework or theoretically position your literature research within your literature. So you get to choose what theory. There is no must-use theory, no popular theory. It is what is appropriate for you to answer your research questions or achieve your research aim. Why? Well, if you have some sort of theoretical framework or literature theoretically positioned arguments, it helps you identify actually the research issue that you're dealing with, gives you a structure for interpreting the archival material, developing a narrative or drawing conclusions, actually helps writing it up, and allows to make things much more explicit when you're actually throughout the article, rather than what we see quite often, and Carolyn's allowed to smile here, which is a sandwich at the beginning and the end of the article. So somebody very nicely introduces the theory, never makes any reference to the concepts, ideas right through the article, and gets to the conclusion and might say a couple of words. So it's about putting it all together. So another kind of question I get asked a lot was, where do I find the data? Or in history speak, the evidence. And there is just so many sources from the accounting records and practices. So some of these are physical. You actually have to go to an archive, and some of them are online. We now have some pretty big databases that you can access. I've got, there's a paper coming up in the next issue that accesses a very large slavery database and does some very nice quantitative analysis of it. You've got your institutional records, legislation and regulation, we're starting to see stuff come through with images. So, you know, we've just did an accounting and entertainment special issue, and that has a, we had stuff looking at war cartoons and superheroes and comics. That type of thing. You can use video and audio, blogs, websites, and online fora. Physical artifacts. We've had a few papers looking at things like stone tablets or temple records. You've got books and articles and reports from, you know, when I first started, and as I said, I told you when I first started, you know, you had to, if you were using archival material, you actually had to physically go into the archives and actually sit there for weeks on end. Like when I did my PhD in varying places and got to know the archivalists really well. But now with digitization, that actually allows us to actually get hold of a lot more data and a lot more evidence, and it reduces the time that you need to spend getting things, the distance to get that. I just was thinking, you know, I actually moved cities from where I was working to come to Wellington to do my PhD, because that was where all the archives I needed were. And it just made more sense. And, you know, the cost as well. The only problem with digitization is that, and we were talking about this last night, is that you can actually lose the feel. So you lose the feel of what's actually around it and where it actually fits within its context. So again, there are pluses and minuses. Now, examples of some of these digital archives are the Virtual Library of the University of Mississippi, which has you know, thousands of digitized English books and accounting and finance journals. Papers Pass, which is a New Zealand database, digital, where they've digitized and made searchable all the very early New Zealand newspapers, which I just absolutely love. And things like, I think there's the SUMA database, which is collects more than 1,000 accounting history outputs contributed by accounting Italian authors. There are a couple of choices to make. You know, what method do I use? Well, basically we use the same methods as you might use in other research, quantitative methods. You know, with digital archives and other news sources, the amount of quantitative studies I'm seeing is actually increasing. So statistical analysis of historical databases or bibliometric tools for systematic or structured lit reviews, or there's been a couple of good papers by Paulo. Oh, yeah, thanks. Ferreri on that. We've also, I do apologize. Trying to multitask here. And then you've got your qualitative methods, which is still the most common method. And we're seeing a bit more of mixed methods. Key limitations. You know, things like history is only ever conditional, because, you know, there is information that we don't know is available, or we do know is available, but we can't get hold of. You know, we need to think about, you know, what the fact that we're always working, if we're relying on the archival sources with incomplete evidence or things that aren't representative or that have been culled or selected in a particular way. One of the key ones is researcher bias, because our own unconscious or sometimes conscious bias influences the selection and interpretation of historical evidence. Or, well, sometimes you've got to watch that you don't start searching for evidence to confirm your theory. Secondary sources, they tend to be written for a purpose, and you've got to watch them because they're written to construct a particular identity. And firm histories, and in particular some of the big four histories are quite interesting to read from that perspective. And as I said, some issues with digital sources. So very quickly, because I know I'm running out of time, I thought I'd just pull this all together and look at the Accounting History Volume 28, which is the latest one. And you can see there, if you look at the topics, we go from taxation to social institution, to the accounting institutions, to regulation and accounting records. We cover from 1501 right through to 2007. We go around the world from New Zealand to Florence to Ecuador to Russia, Romania, Czechoslovakia. We either have a mixture of theory, like Goffman's theory of stigma and Foucauldian theory and agency theory, but we also have theorization based on literature, such as one is an early example of dialogic accounting, the use of technology for accounting, and factors influencing regulatory change. The first 6 are qualitative and archival. The Russian abacus one uses a lot of images. And the last one is mixed methods, so interviews and statistical analysis of document. So in conclusion, it allows us to develop an understanding of the past, provide insights in both the present and potentially the future. When you're doing your accounting history research, think about what is your topic, what is the period of time, where do I have to use a theory? If so, which one? Where do I find the evidence? What method do I use? And what are the limitations of my key limitations of my choice? But really, you know, I think you just need to be curious, have an open mind, follow leads and hunches, and believe me, hunches can really pay off, and enjoy the journey, and you'll never know what you're actually going to discover. I have put here references. I will give my slides to Yinka and he can circulate them to all the participants. I'll do that over the weekend. So thank you, Mercy and Mihi. So any quick questions or comments?
Thank you so much, Carolyn. I think Kriki is in charge of this session.
Thanks, Karen. Thank you for that. I think it's a good overview. It gives us an opportunity to have a serious thought about the applicability of accounting within the discipline. I think in most universities, accounting lecturers have to start thinking about how do I use this? And when they are honest about the problems that they experience in explaining technology, the context of that technology jumps to mind, and that is actually where accounting history is so extremely valuable. I just made a note saying that we have to ask the questions affecting our own societies and our own problems. And I think from that starting point, we can move towards topics of accounting history, which we have not addressed in the past. So it's very contextual, but a methodological issue that Carolyn has raised is the fact that most teachers in accounting are trained as accountants and not as researchers in the wider interdisciplinary field. And I know in my country, this is a major issue. It is beginning to change, but it's very slow in changing, because in the curriculum, undergraduate level and even postgraduate, there is very little place for interdisciplinary research methodology. But I think this is vital for us to benefit from the opportunity that accounting history provides us. Thank you very much, Karen, for your introduction. It's very comprehensive, systematic, and I think very useful. And if your slides are available, I think everybody can benefit from that. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. I don't know if there's any, we can give a virtual clap. Questions for this segment? Otherwise, Carolyn would be on panel, so perhaps we may all defer the question, but if there's a burning question you want to ask, now is the time. Excellent. So maybe we just take